My name is Micah Cutler, and I'm the GIS Director of CGA. And with me this morning is Stephanie Rottinghouse, our Marketing Coordinator for, I hope I got your title right,
Yeah.
for CGA. And I want to welcome you this morning. I see that Lori, it still says connecting to audio. Do you think that, at least that's what it says on mine, I just want to make sure everyone's connected okay. I can't tell if that means it's that she's not connected, or nope, I think she is now, so good. We do have everybody on mute during this presentation, so we don't have to worry about picking up background noises and things that might happen in people's offices. But we would encourage you to open up the chat window. Stephanie will be paying attention to that during this presentation, and so if you have a question, I encourage you to just kind of ask away and interrupt, and Stephanie will interrupt me during the presentation. I'd rather address things as they come up with questions, so feel free to do that. Otherwise, we'll just kind of go through there. It's pretty informal, and like I said, if you have questions or information you want to share, just please let Stephanie know and we'll get that addressed. All right. So talking about location asset management in a GIS. First of all, I kind of want to introduce myself a little bit. I am the GIS Director for CGA. CGA is kind of new getting into the GIS services, so I'm a pretty recent employee. I have been in the profession for, it's starting to be a long time now, 20 plus years, since the late 90s. I have an undergraduate degree in geography and earth science from the University of Northern Iowa, and a graduate degree in geography from the University of South Carolina, and a certified GIS professional. I've spent most of my career in the public sector, so I'm very familiar with working with local governments, county governments, and even state governments and federal nonprofits. So I've kind of gotten around in that sector and have really excited to be working with CGA in providing GIS services to all kinds of organizations. But I think right now, most of the people that we've been talking to are municipalities. I do live and work in north central Iowa, so right where CGA's main service area is located. All right, so what is GIS? So I think one of the things I was hoping to find out is if you have a video connection, do you think we could do a poll question? I'm kind of curious to know if anybody has familiarity with GIS at all. It kind of gives me an idea of our, so on your screen, it should pop up that there's just a quick little multiple choice, kind of gives us an idea of the audience that, that we're working with this morning. And if you want to go ahead and make your selection and submit it, that'll kind of let us, and Stephanie will let us know how that works. Is it okay if I continue on, Stephanie?
Sorry about that. I was on mute. 4 of 7 have voted, so we'll give them just a couple of seconds here.
Okay. Yep. And I know we do have one person on the phone, so that's going to be pretty hard to vote on a screen. So
sure.
we'll just let that person go.
All right, we've got 5 of 7.
Perfect. Well, so with GIS, it really is more than just any one thing. There's a tendency, most of them know about it but haven't used it. Well, that's exactly kind of what I was picturing, and most of you already know what GIS, or at least you've heard of it, so that's fantastic. So GIS is more than just one thing. It's really a component of a system. So there's different components of that system to bring it together. It's not just the map, it's not just the hardware. And one of the things that I like to stress is the people. So usually, in order to have a successful GIS in an organization, you need to have someone who is have the capabilities, the interest to be trained on how to use it. And it really helps to have what we call a GIS champion. GIS can sometimes seem intimidating, especially in the beginning of the startup, and it really helps to have that person, boots on the ground, who sees the value of GIS and is willing to stick it out through the process. And it's also keeping up with it over the years. You know, one of the things I'll be talking about a lot today is data collection. And I think it's important to remember that most of the tools that we'll be talking about are pretty user-friendly and easy to train staff. And so when you talk about people who might utilize the GIS, you could utilize the staff you already have on hand, or even maybe seasonal hires. Sometimes data collection is kind of a repetitive task, and it sometimes is well suited towards maybe a summer high school or college student seasonal hire in good weather to do data collection. So people are an important part of a GIS. There's also the hardware. You do need usually a desktop to run it, and we can talk about mobile devices for data collection. I think the one thing to remember is the days are gone where you need a very powerful, expensive computer to run GIS software. Today's software is web-based, and it's much easier it's much easier on machines, and so you don't not quite need the hardware specifics that used to be a hindrance in order to get a GIS started. The software has really revolutionized in the last 5 years. There are still a heavy use GIS desktop applications that professionals such as myself use. But really what has made GIS so exciting in the last few years, especially for smaller communities, is the move towards online applications, just like utilizing the cloud, just like everything else. And that really makes it much more accessible, both for cost and for ease of use, and really makes GIS much more widespread than it used to be. Data. GIS is no good without the data. And data comes from all kinds of sources. It can be from existing CAD and digital data. It can come from county. The county is collecting lots of data that our rural communities utilize. It can be from scanned documents that are sitting in filing cabinets right now, or maybe plans, inspection reports for, say, manholes, hydrants, aerial photography that may have been flown by a municipality, a county, or the state. So there's lots of sources of data, and really what makes the GIS very powerful is it takes those different sources of information. There might be pockets of information spread throughout, and really brings it all together in one easy to use kind of interface. And then there's the analysis component of GIS. So after you've done all this data collection and the people that are using it, you get to ask questions. Questions such as, how many valves have been inspected in the last 2 years? Not just where the valves are, but what kind of condition are they in? How many hydrants have been flushed in the last year? Is there any that have been broken or missing or need repair? How many miles of pipe do I have in my city? Where's the place that has the most infrastructure failures? So you can start asking these questions, and some of these answers might already be sitting in a stack of paper on your desk, but conveying that information to decision makers such as city council people or department heads can be really difficult when it's just sitting on a piece of paper. And so GIS really helps in that decision-making process. It's what makes it so very powerful. So what we're going to talk about a little bit today is how GIS can benefit your community. And I tried to use as many real-world examples as possible. And I think it's important to remember that as we talk about the benefits, that this is just kind of the easy stuff to get started. But my experience has been that once a community or an organization is committed to a GIS, that you start seeing more and more applications and uses for that GIS. And that really makes it very exciting. And it makes it something that's scalable. So as we talk about ways to get started, you can start big and you can always add on to it, either because of personnel, because of more data, because of more time, all of that. So one of the main benefits and where things usually get started for GIS is asset management. So asset management is really talking about what do you have and where is it? And anybody who works in government, the public sector, knows that one of the main tasks of being a public sector is asset management, keeping track of your infrastructure, the condition of your infrastructure, and planning for future infrastructure. And in order to do that, you need to know where it is. And it just can't be sitting in someone's head of that experienced employee that's been on staff for 30 years, because they're not going to be around forever. So that usually is where GIS can start in terms of spearheading the process and really gets it going, because as we know in all across the United States and in Iowa, our infrastructure is only aging, and maintaining that infrastructure is incredibly important. So talking about maintaining those records. So one of the things that is really wonderful about where GIS has gone with the cloud-based systems is that you can access that information from a Chromebook, from a lightweight laptop, from a desktop, from an iPad, from a smartphone. So the ability to maintain, both access your data and change information about that data is really at the hands of the staff. So there's nothing more frustrating than looking at a map of a hydrant or a manhole and seeing that information about that structure is incorrect and not having the ability to update the information and change it and make it correct. And what would be equally frustrating is to make a paper list of this and then send it off to a third party and have them make the changes and the updates. That's a really antiquated and would be a really frustrating experience. So one of the things that I would like to stress is that we're already maintaining our records. This just does it in a more efficient way. And if someone's in the field updating these records, somebody back in the office can also see the same records being updated. So you just have to touch it once instead of 2 or 3 times. Gathering information. So one of the uses of GIS that I've used quite a bit is for economic development and for grants, applying for grants. I have here a photo of a really poor looking sidewalk. So, you know, there's grants out there to improve sidewalk conditions. Or maybe a city council is looking to pass an ordinance where somebody has to, you know, keep their level of sidewalk and has 2 years to maybe improve their sidewalk condition. It's hard to make changes like that if you don't know what the condition is of the sidewalks in your community. So a GIS on screen really allows you to say, how many miles or feet of sidewalk do I have? What's the condition of each of these? Is there a pocket of the community that maybe needs to be focused on first? And so other metrics, there's a sign program that DOT has that allows you to update the signs in your community with some grant sharing properties. But if you don't know what signs you have and where they are and how many we have and what's the condition of the sign, it's really hard to gather that information in order to make a successful grant application. And that's just in addition to basic mapping, PDFs and JPEG images that are often requested to go along with grant applications. Another benefit we've talked about quite a bit is GPS data collection. So what I have here is a photo on the left. It is a smartphone that's just an Android Pixel phone on a little bracket, and then the bracket is attached to a pole. And at the top of that pole is an antenna, and that antenna is Bluetooth to the smartphone. So what that does is that allows you to do data collection on a smartphone. You can do data collection on a smartphone just by itself. You could literally pick up a phone, log into your map and start changing and editing and collecting GPS data. It's not completely recommended, at least for most communities, only because your accuracy is only going to be as good as that cell phone spatial accuracy. And if you've ever done any GPS testing, sometimes your accuracy can be 12 feet off, depending on your cell phone signal. So we usually recommend that you invest in a digital Bluetooth receiver. That will, there's different levels. Obviously, the more money you spend, the more accuracy you'll get. But you can usually, for not too much more money, get sub-meter accuracy. And then for a little bit more, you can do sub-foot. And, you know, for most things, sub-meter is sufficient. That means that if you were to go back to this location, the accuracy of the point would be within about 3 feet of where you were standing. Sometimes with utilities, it's important, you know, communities want to go sub-foot, which is usually a little bit better for one-call situations. But there are options, and the nice thing is you can start at one level and see if that works for you, and if it doesn't, then you can always upgrade and go to the next level. The other screen capture I have here shows an iPad being used in the field, and then a little bit of what it looks like on the screen for that data collection. So I have here just a short video there's no sound part of this video. And this kind of shows the interface on an iPad. So here, the person can click and add a point of where they're standing. This is of a main break. They can type in information about the main break. And you can even have drop-down menus so that the data collection is a lot faster and you don't have to type and spell every single thing that you put into this. And then because you're on a mobile device, you can take a photo or attach a photo that you've already taken of what's happening on the ground. So if you have a picture, let's say you have your valves are open because they're doing construction in the street, you can snap a photo of the condition of the asset and attach it to the point, and then you can come back and you can see what the photo looks like by clicking on the screen. So it's a really great way to organize your photos attached to what you have in your assets. All right, so spatial information. One of the most powerful things about a GIS is bringing information from a variety of sources. It's really a kind of a central repository of information. And you know, here I have a screenshot, and what this is showing is the right-of-way easement for a public highway, and it's based on a legal description on a township drainage section. And if you have a stack of these, and let's say you're not very familiar with this community, or you don't really know how to read legal descriptions based on township and range, it can be really hard to understand what this document is referencing. And so something like a GIS could have a point on a map, and you click on that point and it shows you this legal document that you might need to show what area on the map is affected by this document. And you can even make this available to the public. You know, some communities have chosen to take this information, build a GIS, and then push it out to the public. And that's part of that open records and reducing traffic in our community buildings, which, as we know, in the last 3 months when the world turned upside down, reducing traffic in our buildings is a real positive. So there's a lot of things that you can do with the GIS. And I can speak from experience that if I needed to get this information, many people wouldn't even know where to find this kind of a document. And when you put it on a map and they can click on it, it becomes much more accessible to the public and to the employees. Find information in the field. So even though you may have built something on a desktop, you can view it on a mobile device. And if any changes are made in the mobile, you can see those updated changes in the desktop back in. Multiple people can see the updates in real life. And I think that really makes it powerful and makes it much more likely for people to be using it on a daily basis. And that kind of goes back to this revolution that's happened in the last 5 years of making the software so much easier to use than it used to be. And then there's records, lots of records. So one of the things that you might consider doing is scanning documents. And if you don't have access to a scanner, most counties and CGA offices do have access to a scanner. And so you could build a GIS based on scanning your records and then linking them to your points or lines on a map. You know, if there was ever a fire, if there's ever a tornado, all you have to do is talk to someone in Parkersburg about that experience. Or somebody really has a wealth of information, but they're going to be retiring soon. These are all concerns about preserving your records in the long term and making sure that they don't exist just on paper. Plan for the future. A GIS is all about collecting what you have now, but it's also about planning on what you have in the future. And investing in a GIS is a great way to signal to people interested in economic development in your community and investing in your community that you're a progressive community and that you're looking towards the future and wanting to build tools to manage what you have to outlive any particular elected official or city clerk. And then here's so what this is called a dashboard. The software I've been focusing and talking about is called ASRI. It's a company that produces ArcGIS software. And one of the components they have is called a dashboard. And this is a really powerful viewer. So what this allows is we've been really focusing on maps that you might access on a mobile device or a phone or desktop. This takes those same maps and kind of embeds it into kind of a one-stop shop of information. So the screenshot I have here kind of shows code violations. So nuisance violations, setbacks, illegal zoning uses, trash, think of those kinds. And so think of if a city council person had access to this information and they could see how many cases of nuisance violations, which ones have been closed, which ones are still open, how many are repeat offenders. It's a lot of powerful information that allows the decision makers to set ordinances and policies based on this information. Where you might have recently seen the ArcGIS Dashboard product is the Iowa Department of Health, Public Health has really taken advantage of the dashboard when showing information for COVID-19. So if you've seen the map where they have the state of Iowa and it's the number of cases per county and then some extra tabular information, that's based on ArcGIS Dashboard. So what really makes this software very powerful is that it can be utilized by a small community. The example here I show is a community of less than 1,000 people, but it also can be scaled and be used, you know, by offices in the state of Iowa or even the federal government. So it really shows that smaller rural communities and organizations can really utilize the same toys that those with much larger budgets can utilize. When there's a emergency response, how many communities have had a main break and they don't know where the shutoff valves are? So part of that, keeping track of assets can be really critical at times of a crisis. If you were to have a major event, such a hailstorm or tornado or flooding, and some of your assets may be gone, underwater, not visible, this would be a great way that someone on a tablet can be standing where they know that the water main is, even if they can't see it. And that allows them to be more confident in maintaining the infrastructure and finding things to both fix it and repair it. And here, this is an embedded map. You could set up if you want to take a map and make it a public map. What I have here, for example, is places of infrastructure failures. It kind of tells you what system it is, what the device is, and I've even included a photo here of what the failure, the water main break looked like. Oh, now I just got to get, there it is, back to my. So this is allows you to create maps and systems for internal uses that are used by the staff, but it also allows you with the same software to create maybe a simpler map of zoning or of something that you want to share with the public. And then there's another product called Survey 123. And it's a really easy to use way to survey. There's a geographic component, but what's really powerful for this is that it really allows you to create a custom survey similar to like a monkey survey, but this allows you to map it, the responses. A great example of this I have here is somebody who is filling out a survey to find out who's living in the household so that emergency management might be able to do better planning on finding out where their elderly population is, or if someone has a special needs or has special handicaps and they need to plan for that in their emergency management plans. And it's a simple survey that you can, scalable on a mobile device or a desktop. And another example is the community I live in had something called before the city council about allowing chickens inside city limits. And unfortunately, all they did was send a piece of paper with just a few words on it in the local newspaper to garner community response about how the community felt about chickens being allowed in the city limits. Survey 123 would have been a really great tool, and it would have reached possibly a segment of the population that doesn't subscribe to the local newspaper, which might be the more mobile young citizens of a community. Who are used to doing things in an online digital environment. So all of these tools are part of a GIS in different components, some more graphic and some are more survey based, but they all kind of touch on geographic information and can be utilized in a GIS. So when talking about CGA, I wanted to visit a little bit about why CGA might be a really great solution if you're interested in starting a GIS for your organization. as you may or may not know if you've done some research, but excuse me, GIS is not a one-fit-all solution. So I know sometimes it can be intimidating because either we see GIS in very large communities or large counties that have maybe bigger budgets or have been doing it for a good decade now. And it may seem like it's out of reach for a community. And the beauty of it is it's very scalable. And so it can start in a way that works for a community, either because of staffing or because they have a specific problem they're trying to solve, or because budgets are limited. And you can plan for the future and grow it as your assets change or your staffing change or time changes. And that CGA has got a 60-year history of working with rural communities and really giving a customized approach to ensure that the data layers that develop are the ones that your community is looking to use, not just what we think is important, but what you think is important. And budget is so important, you know, and especially if you're a public employee, I always say, you know, if budget wasn't a problem, you guys wouldn't be listening to this. You'd already have GIS because it's fabulous, right? But everything has to be done in a way that works within a city's budget. And CGA has a long history of all kinds of community projects, infrastructure projects that understand that the way that it works in a municipality has to be done in a way that can grow and fit into the budget that they have. So here's a nice picture of me sitting at my computer. What do we do? Well, you know, we can create new data for you. So if you don't have anything, it's a place to start and to help figure out how your staff can collect that information. We can give you a framework that allows you to start collecting that information and utilizing the knowledge, the experience, and the time of your staff. But maybe you have some data, you know, you've had infrastructure problem changes in the past, you have new water mains that have been installed, so you have design plans. You have maybe digital CAD files. Those can be converted over into a GIS, so you can utilize the information that you do have and then build on it from there. Maybe you're in a county that has a lot of county GIS information. Most counties do these days, and that's public information that you as a city can utilize. It's easier than others in some counties, but it's possible in all counties. And so there's a lot of property information that you can use as the basis of your mapping in your community. There's also a lot of addressing information that can be tied to maybe your city utilities. You know, you're already collecting a lot of geographic information in your with your utilities database. Everybody has an address, right? And then there's always GPS data collection options. So if you're out in the field and you're standing on a manhole, you can collect information about that manhole. And you can often see those manholes on aerial photography too. So there's multiple ways that you can start building a GIS. And you can start small, maybe you focus on one layer. You just want to find all the hydrants for the fire department. And then maybe you'll want to build all the manholes and then start with the stuff you can see above ground and then build the underground things that are hard to see as changes are made or repairs are made. And you can kind of set up a process so that you know in a 5-year plan, this is where you want to be. And CGA can help you do that. We would start always by meeting with a client and, you know, identifying the strengths of your community. Who on staff has the right skill set or has the time that it's allowed by a department head to really champion a GIS. You know, we would help you develop a vision and a plan of action. You know, we want to get to be, how do we get there and what's the roadmap look like? And it's going to be different for every community. You all are working within different budgets. You have different personality as city councils. You have different priorities. And CGA is small enough to give you individual client attention. If you want to talk about GIS with CGA, you're going to end up talking to me. And so that you can really personalize what works for you. And I would definitely say that I would be more than happy to do any kind of a meeting, both Zoom, online, like we're doing right now, or, you know, in person, and really talk about what is unique about your community and how we can really help you build something that is going to reflect your community and organization. We'll help you develop a data model. A data model is just a really fancy term for, it usually ends up being a spreadsheet. And I've got an example in this graphic here. And this just shows you what you want to build, like a hydrant, and then the information about that hydrant that you want to collect. You want to collect how old is it? When was it installed? Who's the manufacturer? When was it last serviced? What's the flow rate? What day did you test that flow rate? You know, there's all kinds of information, and CGA can help you figure out, because we have a vast experience of information, especially with utilities, we can help you figure out what you're likely to want to collect. At the same time, you can also say, this is important to us. You know, we have really had difficulty with infrastructure failures along this street. We really want to collect information and photographs so that we can make a case to City Council about why we need to make a change to this water pipe and why this is so important. Maybe you've had a lot of nuisance problems and you want to collect information about your nuisance properties. We can help you do that. And we also have a planner on staff who is well-versed in the world of economic development, planning, subdivisions, nuisances, all those kind of fun stuff, ordinances, and a lot of those have a geographic component to it. Convert existing data. So I talked about if you had paper maps sitting around, a lot of times a great place to start, low-hanging fruit, so to speak, is most communities have a zoning map hanging in City Hall. And I've seen a City Hall map be anything from colored pencils to just shaded with regular pencil or pen. Maybe they had the local council of governments create one years ago. And maybe there's been changes and it hasn't been updated. That's a great place to start. And I think it's really important to show, to know that when we talk about viewing data online, we're also talking about editing data. So it is a full GIS. And that's in an online map. So what I have here is just kind of a sample online map that's kind of embedded in my presentation. And I wanted to show, by clicking on it here in the lower left corner, you can see that I've got information about the parcel and a link to, in this community, there's a beacon site. I want to say 60 out of the 99 counties have a beacon site. The rest of them usually have some kind of parcel data in a different format, hosted by a different company. But we can take information and link that. And then we've added on top of here, we've got like water main information. So I click on here and it tells me what the ID number is of that water main, the size of it, and what kind of water, and when that information was last updated. So this allows you to view your assets, and you can make changes if you are editing. And if we have time at the end, I will give you a quick view of what that looks like. And I would reiterate, I would be happy to sit down with anybody and kind of do a real hands-on demonstration of what the software and what your options are, because I know a lot of people like me are kind of a hands-on kind of person, and to really fully understand what your options are, it helps to kind of look behind the scenes and see how some of this is developed. And it really makes it much more approachable and not quite such a vague GIS. It's just this thing that other people do. Data collection, there's always data collection. And what's really great and what I love about your smaller communities is you guys have really walkable communities. And so the idea of collecting information around your community is very doable. You know, if you talk to large cities, your Waterloos, your Des Moines and Cedar Rapids, you know, they can't even begin to cover a fraction of their community in a summer, whereas a smaller community, it's very, you have less staff, but you also, you know where your stuff is, and you know that you can build something quickly because you just don't have as many of them, and that's a real advantage. We would encourage, so really there's not too many options. Everything I'm showing here is an Esri product. They're kind of the Microsoft of the GIS world. So it's kind of like everyone's pretty used to Excel and Office. This is pretty much the people for GIS software, the package. I would say 90% of GIS users are using this software. So they have a couple different data collections. Their main one's called Collector for ArcGIS. It just so happens they've just released, they're going to be doing consolidating a few apps together to something called ArcGIS Field Maps, and that's going to be coming out this September. And I would be happy to do a demonstration of what that looks like. You know, we could do something online, or you can visit a community. We can log onto a phone and we can walk around a community and you can see what data collection would look like on a smartphone. You can also, here's an example of that screenshot again of attaching photos. You can attach PDFs, you can attach Excel files, you can attach about anything that you might want to upload. Usually it's a JPEG or a PDF. And then once you do have a GIS kind of in place, CGA offers ongoing technical support. It's important to know that the kind of system that we're talking about building would be owned by you. That this is not CGA data, but this is your organization's data. And, you know, training and ongoing training, remote technical support, or maybe you get started and you love it and you just want to do more and more. And so helping you expand or seeing what other options you have is really important. And so, you know, if whether you're doing a long-term project or a short-term project, CGA is just a, I started to stutter, CGA staff kind of work through whatever level that you want to go. So I encourage you to reach out to me if you're interested in finding out more information about how CGA can help you do, or how you can build a system. I would love to talk to you about the kind of data is your community and how you really get started. Like I said, I'm a visual learner myself, and I don't always fully understand stuff until someone walks me through the hows and the whys, and I'm more than happy to do that. I'm foremost a GIS evangelist. I want it to be in every community and county that we can possibly have, and I want to make sure that you know all your resources to put together a tool in a budget that will work for you. Hey, Stephanie, did we have any questions come up while I was chit-chatting?
We do have a couple, but we're going to follow up with those folks after the webinar. It's not something that would address the whole crew,
okay.
So.
Not a problem. Well, I really want to thank people for their time and letting me, you guys are my first webinar, so you're my guinea pig, and I really appreciate that. And my phone number and my email and our website is on the screen right now. And so please jot that down. If you do have any follow-up questions, I'd be more than happy to reach out, and we can continue the conversation in a more one-to-one setting. Anything else? Well, if that's it, then I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.